يهتف بثلاث كلمات الله وسوريا وبشار. كنيسة وجامع متحدين والمحبي عنوان الدين، وملايين السوريين وما بدهن إلا بشار.
A few weeks ago, a surprising end was brought to a war that had dragged on for about 13 years. Bashar Al-Assad, who had been the president of the country since 2000, had fled the country to Russia unannounced. His family has ruled Syria with an iron fist since 1971. Bashar was not unprepared for his departure, though. Several sources report that the regime transferred about $250 million in cold hard cash to Russia between 2018 and 2019. Mostly in $100 US bills and €500 notes, and deposited them into Russian bank accounts. This is just a small fraction of their wealth, though. A report from the US Department of State sheds light on the estimated wealth and income sources of Syrian President Bashar Al-Assad and his extended family. Open source estimates place the Assad family net worth at about $1 billion to $2 billion. But the report does emphasize that these figures are challenging to verify. Like other savvy statesmen, much of the family's assets are likely concealed through offshore accounts, real estate holdings, and corporations registered under false names, which makes it very difficult to verify everything. However, some of the Assad family's lavish acquisitions have been uncovered over the years, offering a glimpse into how they spent their wealth. They have had hundreds of millions of dollars worth of assets seized in the UK, Spain, and France. And an investigation by the Financial Times revealed that, more recently, the family purchased 18 luxury apartments in Moscow, many of which are in the city district and the Rubyovka district, which are home to plenty of other wealthy elites. The presidential palaces in Damascus and Latakia were ransacked following the family's departure. Camera crews filled the inside of the palaces, showing how they were lavishly renovated with rare imported marble, gold-plated furniture, and customized imported woodwork. The car collection was my personal favorite. Bashar had a Ferrari F50, an F430, of which only 350 were ever made, an R8, an SLS AMG, an Aston Martin, the list goes on and on. But where did all this wealth come from? Definitive answers started trickling in more recently. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, known by most as HTS, now marches through the streets of Damascus as the new government of Syria. Journalists, including the YouTuber Bald and Bankrupt, have gained access to some of these narcotics factories that were under the control of Bashar al-Assad. In Bald's footage, he shows that millions of capsules of a drug called Captagon were allegedly produced in the factory for a few cents a piece and sold for a few dollars a pop.
All the ingredients to make this illegal drug. Wow, and then here there's the mixers. So, look guys, so here, all the raw ingredients that were brought here to this country, to Syria, and then they made this illegal drug that I'd never heard of before, but highly addictive, highly dangerous drug called Captagon. This is the mixer, look, the old regime mixer where they used to mix things in. And this factory would have generated millions of dollars for the regime, for Assad,
yes,
right?
Like from the information I know, every tablet is around $5 US.
$5, right,
yeah,
okay.
You can imagine.
Wow. So here in this secret little factory, they were making millions of dollars worth of illegal drugs to export to Dubai, Turkey, Lebanon, Middle Eastern countries where the drug is super popular.
Captagon is an amphetamine originally developed in the 60s to treat conditions like ADHD. It was banned in most countries for how addictive it was, but it became pretty popular in the Middle East. I'm sure not all my viewers will be able to get this reference, but it's like Adderall, but stronger. It heightens your alertness and it gives you energy and focus and all the things that amphetamines do. The emergence of Syria as a narco state cannot be understood without tracing the roots of Captagon production back in Europe. Soviet Bulgaria used to hold the crown as the Captagon manufacturer of the world. The secret police in Soviet Bulgaria would oversee the production, and they'd also facilitate in its transport by distributing it across the world through the state-owned import-export company. In the early 2000s, drug enforcement of Bulgaria stepped up, and Captagon production was pretty much eradicated in Europe, which meant that its manufacture had to be driven to fragile states closer to the drug's primary markets, which were in the Arabian Peninsula. Lebanon's weak central state facilitated the rapid expansion of Captagon production in the mid-2000s, and by 2007, the first officially reported Captagon lab in the Levant was detected in Lebanon. While Syria acknowledged a large demand for the drug domestically and reported increasing seizures from 2008 to 2009, it had not officially reported any Captagon laboratories in the country until 2011. When the civil war started and violent conflict consumed the country, Syria had become the epicenter of production for Captagon of the whole world. These new Captagon pills made in Syria did not contain any of the original active ingredient. The original active ingredient was phenethylene, but now it's just a mix of a bunch of common substances like caffeine, amphetamine, and also theophylline. These pills are cheap to produce, with production facilities that are highly mobile and require minimal equipment. Captagon's affordability and versatility makes it ubiquitous in Syria, where pills sell for 50 cents to $1. But over in Gulf markets like Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, the value skyrockets to over $20 a pill. These pills are produced for only a few cents a piece, so the profit margins are incredible. The eruption of conflict in Syria in 2011 created a fragmented state where territorial control became the key to economic survival. Armed groups, including the Islamic State and other factions, started to capitalize on the erosion of rule of law by exploiting the narcotics trade. And during this period, Captagon production surged in areas beyond the government's reach, establishing Syria as the Captagon capital of the world. Now, the Islamic State, despite some sensationalized media reports, had limited institutional involvement in the drug trade. Instead, it relied on alternative revenue streams like oil sales, extortion, and looting, which reportedly brought in annual revenues of about $1 to $2 billion at its peak. But don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that there weren't localized instances of drug taxation and smuggling under Islamic State rule. Other armed groups, including Islamist factions and secular militias, also engage in narcotics trafficking, often leveraging checkpoints and smuggling routes in order to extract revenue. Now, by 2018, the Syrian government, with Russia's help, with Iran's help, Hezbollah's help, started regaining large swaths of the country back. And as they started gaining these regions of the country back, they took control of the Captagon production facilities there, as well as taking control of the smuggling routes that led out of the country and into export markets around the entire world. This marked a massive shift. The Assad regime and its allies began to dominate the Captagon trade. They were the guys. In 2020 alone, Captagon exports from Syria were valued at $3.46 billion. So how did it all work? Well, the way that the Syrian territory was fragmented played a very big role in the way that the Syrian narcotics economy was shaped. Now, the region of northeast Syria didn't really see as much narcotics trafficking compared to other parts of the country, and this was in large part because of the Kurdish and United States presence there. Remember, this Kurdish presence, with United States support in the background, played a pretty big role in eradicating ISIS, at least in that northeastern region of Syria. And as they fought them off, they actually established quite the foothold in that region. Pretty similar to the way that the Kurds have done it in northern Iraq as well, but I wouldn't say it's as organized as the way they have it there. So in the northeast, there is some small-scale hashish production that occurs along the Euphrates River, and Captagon is smuggled into this area from elsewhere through government-held territories and checkpoints. The northwest of the country, however, is a different story. This is a transit hub, and this is in large part because the Assad government controlled the northwestern part of the country. Hashish enters this region from Lebanon, where it undergoes packaging and branding in the cities of Aleppo. And the production in this area is very widespread, with several hubs. Some local sources indicate that Iran-backed militias supply chemical ingredients for the production in this area as well, which comes from Lebanon and also the Iranian presence in the region. And this region's proximity to Turkey facilitates smuggling into Europe and beyond. The rest of the production occurred in other parts of the country that were held by the Assad regime. Nearly all export channels fall within these government-controlled territories. The Captagon production occurs in industrial zones near Damascus, Homs, and Latakia. There's also plenty of cannabis cultivation that is around the area of the Lebanon-Syria border. And these regions also facilitate the trafficking of hashish into Gulf markets. Key smuggling routes here include the Nasib border crossing with Jordan and the Kalamun Mountains. The Kalamun region in particular serves as a major production and transit hub for both hashish and Captagon. The narcotics trade relies on three primary routes: the northern route in Turkey, the southern route in Jordan and the Gulf, and the maritime routes to the Mediterranean. The southern route is critical because it connects Syria to Saudi Arabia, which is the largest Captagon market in the world. Jordanian authorities report consistent amphetamine seizures along this route, which shows this area's importance in terms of regional drug flows. The Assad regime's drug network operates military units like the 4th Division, the Republican Guard, and also local militias and private security companies. Bashar's younger brother, Bashar Al-Assad, reportedly oversees production and trafficking through the 4th Armored Division, a special arm of the Syrian Arab Army that is the military force behind many of the illicit economic activities of the state. The division operates checkpoints across Syria, collecting fees for commercial traffic. By operating these checkpoints around the country, they also control the smuggling routes and can facilitate and protect both the production and transportation of the substance. Iran-backed militias like Hezbollah also play a role. These groups control the franchising of Captagon production in central and southern Syria, supplying chemical ingredients and securing smuggling routes into Lebanon and Jordan. Hezbollah's involvement extends to managing cross-border trafficking, particularly through the Kalamoon Mountains. This network was critical in the Assad regime's ability to sustain its narco economy. As the Syrian war dragged on, its economy continued to collapse. By 2018, Syria's GDP had shrunk to $21 billion from $67 billion in 2011, with legitimate exports plummeting to just $700 million by 2019. Compare that figure to the estimated $3.5 billion in Captagon exports that same year. The money from Captagon is one of the most important sources of foreign currency, and they by far surpass the combined value of all legal exports of the country. By 2023, the GDP of Syria fell to only $9 billion. But that's just on paper. So, the new government of Syria has pledged to discontinue the production and distribution of narcotics. Many of the production facilities controlled by the Assad regime are no longer in operation. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham has stated that the narcotics production is reflective of a criminal regime and wishes to be recognized by the international community in a more legitimate light, largely moving away from the isolationist Assad regime that made a lot of its money from drug trafficking. Time will tell if the group lives up to their words.
الشعب السوري بالساحات للمجد بيرفع رايات عم يهتف بثلاث كلمات